Yeah, well.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Ben McCormack, I'm the editor of Squaremeal, and I'm very pleased to say that my guest here today is Doherty, who's the executive chef of Duck and Waffle restaurant, not too far away in the Heron Tower, so please give him a warm welcome. I think you must have one of the best views of any kitchen and restaurant in London. Do you get bored of looking at that stunning skyscape every day?
You don't get bored, but you kind of forget that it's there. It's one of those things that you only really notice the change now. So you see the sunrise and the sunset and all of the beautiful colours that happen, and also when you're in a cloud, that's my favourite time, when it's just white all the way around. But yeah, you don't get bored of it, but you certainly kind of get used to it.
You don't find yourself kind of stirring a pot of soup and just daydreaming, and it's all
burned.
burned.
It's when the sun's setting or rising that it's, especially this time of year where it's not rising at 4 o'clock in the morning, but it's getting closer and closer to sort of 8, half 8. That's when the whole place, you're serving food to a full restaurant and everyone just rushes to the window because the sky's gone green for about 3 minutes or something like that. It is pretty special. It's a little bit annoying, but I guess it's all part of the parcel of having a good view.
It's such a spectacular setting as well, which we find ourselves recommending it all the time for proposals or for really impressive business meetings. Do you get lots of proposals, or people who come for special occasions, and you're kind of watching this heartwarming scene unfolding?
You do, and I apologise if anyone's done or had this to them at Duck and Waffle in advance, but Valentine's Day it's hilarious because the room is reset like a chessboard of just tables of 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And you get the first guest coming in, so one guy comes in and he gives over 4 red roses, and she's like, oh God, that was so sweet. Table next one comes in with 6 roses. And the guy's walking up with 2 roses and he's thinking, fuck, what? So it's just a whole game of trumps, and then someone breaks the ice and gets on one knee and proposes, and then it ruins it for everyone else who's planning on doing it. So you're just watching that from the past and just thinking, who's going to be first?
Do you get any funny requests, people asking for an engagement ring to be left in a glass of champagne, that sort of stuff?
They asked us to put an engagement, like a massive rock of an engagement ring inside a baked Alaska. But it's tricky because you are going to chew on it. And also the baked Alaska is something that you have to pipe in advance and all that kind of stuff. So it's we just put it on the side and kind of buried it with a bit of chocolate stuff. And yeah, I guess everyone wants to do something special.
Presumably most people say yes as well when they're proposed to in Duck and Waffle.
They do. I think even if they were going to say no, they say yes and then swear them.
And do you have a favourite time of year for the restaurant? Is it kind of when the clocks change and it gets darker and the view changes? Is that maybe a favourite time?
I think favourite time of the year, it's probably winter time, just because you get the spectacular sunrises and you can see them unless you're working the night shifts. And then I think favourite time of the day is quite interesting. It's that beautiful moment where it's dark enough for the lights on the outside buildings to be relevant, but also light enough for you to see stuff, just as the sun's dropping, but it hasn't quite dropped. And I think that's when the restaurant, you can see it physically changing from quite a clean, crisp, lunchy daytime space to quite a sassy, kind of darker, sexier vibe in the evening.
And you're open pretty much 24 hours, and you're on, is it the 37th floor?
40th.
40th.
Yeah.
Never been good with numbers. So there's 2 huge challenges there. What's the greatest challenge in being in that location?
It's funny, the greatest challenge is something that the guest, rightly so, has no idea about. And it's something that does restrict us quite a lot in what we're able to produce and the amount of covers we can do and the style of food and the level of cooking. And that's the fact that we are so high up. So our production kitchen, where we do all our prep, is in -1, so underground. And then the lift inside the building only goes to the 38th floor, and then they have to carry everything up 2 huge flights. But then when you're planning a menu and you've got 50 chefs and 120 front of house people and all that kind of stuff, and you're trying to figure out who does what, and can we train everybody to do this? Can we do this dish 300 times a day? Can we logistically prep that down there and bring it up and then carry it all the way up and then do that? All of these questions, and as soon as the answer's no to any of them, we have to go back to the drawing board. And for a creative person, it can be, I think in the beginning it was quite frustrating. Now it's, no matter what kitchen you work in, you're always going to have something that is going to be tricky, whether it's the size of the kitchen or whatever. But yeah, that's the hardest thing. And ultimately, when you come up in that front lift, it's something I say to my chefs when they do a trial shift. They come up in that front lift, they get whisked up to the top, it's like Harry Potter or something, and then they walk through to this beautiful bar, and then we have an interview there, and then we go to the kitchen, you can smell the food, it's all open, the place is buzzing, and you have to say to them, well, you're never going to see that again. You're going to come in a staff entrance, you're going to go in an internal goods lift that takes you up to this, it's painfully slow, that stops at every floor, and then you have to carry all your stuff, it's all of these kind of things that it's, like I say, you're offsetting that beautiful view and the location with a logistical glitch, let's call it.
And when you were planning menus, or when you were first planning the menus?
Sorry, I knew that would happen at some point. Tranquilizing.
Super fan. Were you consciously thinking how hard it would be to come up with food that was going to compete with the view, or to hold people's attention on the plate as much as what was outside of the window would do?
Yeah, it's incredibly hard, and I think lots of you're right, your approach is always trying to do something very, very good, whether you're considering your competitors to be your next door neighbour, or you're thinking of food critics. For us it was the view, because apart from Sushi Samba, but we're the same family, we don't have any neighbours, and that kind of competition, there's always, the thing that really got me in the beginning was I don't want to be a restaurant that's full anyway, just because you've got a good view. And I also don't want to be known as a restaurant that has a good view. So we try to drill that into our staff from day one, is that our biggest competitor is the view, and everything else that goes with it. So again, you whisk up through this lift, you see the bar, you have a nice cocktail, you walk through, the kitchen's open, all of that sort of stuff. They're going like this, their emotions are going like this, and they haven't had a bite to eat. So the only way then is to either maintain it or to drop it. And obviously, heaven forbid we don't want to drop it. So, yeah.
I think you train with Herbert Berger at 1 Lombard Street. How has city dining changed since those days, between then and Duck and Waffle, would you say?
Quite a lot. The reason I took the job at Duck and Waffle, it's maybe a little known fact, is because I trained at 1 Lombard Street, which is also a city restaurant. And whilst it was incredibly hard, it was a Michelin-star restaurant and you're working 80-odd hours a week, it was closed on Saturday and Sunday. And even if you were working a 17, 18-hour day, the evenings were a lot quieter. So I thought, hang on a second, new restaurant opening in the city, I'm going to have weekends off, I'm going to do all this. And then my first day I was on a plane to Miami to spend 2 months in our sister restaurant, because this place wasn't ready to develop the menus and stuff. And when I got there, the chef said, what are you going to do overnight? And I thought, he's quite smart, he's going to use the overnight time for his prep chefs to work, so it doesn't inhibit the kitchen space too much. Smart guy. No, it was obviously a 24-hour restaurant, and no one had sort of slip that into my interview. So it was, city dining's changed a lot, because it is busy for breakfast, it's busy for lunch and dinner now, which is kind of unheard of, and then overnight is just insane at the moment.
And with that classical training and the menus that you devised for Duck and Waffle, there was obviously a huge difference there. Where did that inspiration for the Duck and Waffle menus come from? Because it's kind of very different to what's on offer in most London restaurants, and you're not going to see those dishes anywhere else.
It's a very slow, organic evolution, I think. When we first opened, we were meant to originally be the sister of this place in Miami that was essentially going to be a copy of that restaurant here, which is an amazing restaurant, but the food there is very Latino. You're in Miami, everyone's slim and beautiful, and everyone's got these stupid little dogs, myself included, obviously. You got palm trees, and it's that whole Cuban vibe, and everyone's drinking rum and kicking back and having a great time. And that doesn't really translate to a skyscraper in London on a rainy day in winter. So we already knew that wasn't going to be an option. So then it was a case of, so what do we do? And then it was just a process of doing tastings and experimenting, and ultimately making mistakes and realizing what works and what doesn't work. And I look at the menu when we first opened it. It's so different. But if you look at it month on month, it doesn't really change. But from, in a 6-month gap, you'll see quite big changes. And that's just, I think that's one of the reasons why it still feels kind of new there. It doesn't feel like an old restaurant, but it's over 4 years old, which in London terms that's quite a while. So those little subtle changes and I guess getting inspired from traveling and all the chefs that work there and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's...
Do you have any favourite countries for food when you are travelling?
Well, there's the obvious ones, New York, America, New York, places like that. But also the weird, not weird, but the lesser explored countries. And it's not so much the food or the ingredients, it's more about the cultural side of it, the eating habits. So, I went to Bangladesh and my mind was blown by a lot of different things they were doing, and going to Burma and seeing all these different influences from all the different border countries. I get more inspiration from that than sitting in a restaurant in New York, but then that said, New York is a pretty good place to go and get some ideas.
Have any of those Burmese or Bangladeshi influences made it onto the menu?
Well, there's a Scotch bhaji, which is kind of inspired by, well, it's actually by India. But, so taking the philosophy, they eat a lot of eggs in India. They also have these, fried onions and stuff like that. So we took a Scotch egg and whacked it inside an onion bhaji and fried that up. So it's an inspired thing. So it's never going to be a literal translation or a literal inspiration from something, but more of thinking, that's quite like that. And also all the whole brunch vibe comes from Asia a lot, because if you go to Asia, you have these freshly baked breads with curried vegetables and fried eggs. I mean, that's like a hangover cure on a plate, and it's in the book.
Do you have any favourite things on the menu?
At the moment, we have a nice rabbit dish at the moment, miso glazed rabbit dish, so it's a miso glazed rabbit, so it tastes kind of Japanesey, and then you've got like a suet crust on it, so it smells like I hate the word deconstructed, but like a deconstructed pie type thing, with burnt cauliflower and all that kind of stuff. And then we do a whole roast chicken, just on potatoes and mushrooms and with truffles, old school, just a proper roast bird.
You mentioned your book. Could you tell us a little more about that?
It's available on Amazon. It's called Toast Hash Roast Mash, and it's kind of an all-day brunch vibe type thing. So there's a chapter on hangover recipes using leftovers of what you might have kicking around. Then there's like loads of pancakes and different hash and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically really easy food that's kind of different but quick to make, easy to find the ingredients. There's no like 3-hour braises or trying to find pig's tails in Waitrose or anything like that.
When do you find the time to write a book? I mean, it seems such an immense undertaking as well as running a restaurant.
I love it. I mean, I kind of just do it. I either block off a day a week and use one of your days off and just thrash it out over a period of weeks, or bits and bobs here and there. Sometimes if the restaurant's crazy, you'll often see my laptop in the corner, and I'll just sort of do one recipe while I'm working, and then, one down, 99 to go type thing.
And are those recipes you come up with from scratch, or are they things that have been knocking around in your head or on the menu for a few years?
All of it. Sometimes, you want to do a nice brunch for family and friends or whatever, and you think, hang on a second, that was easy, everyone liked it, and I've not really done it before, so write it down. So that's the way I'm working now. Before I would think, okay, they want me to write a book, I need 100 recipes, I'm thinking this, and this, and then you're 20 short, and then you're kind of trying to think of what they are. Whereas now I'm just cooking, and whether it's at home or at work, if something's good and relevant for something like that, I'm just jotting it down. So when we do another one, it's going to be like, okay, I've already got that content there that I know works, and it's a kind of going about it back to front, so to speak.
And you just mentioned your computers in the corner of the kitchen. One of the things you're most famous for, as well as your cooking, of course, is your avid use of social media.
I've slowed down now. Come on.
Where did that come from? Was it sort of a marketing tool originally for you? Did you just enjoy doing it?
I think I was when the restaurant first opened, I was curious. I just signed up to Twitter, and it was kind of, I guess, a curiosity. And then you realise that I don't know. I kind of there he is. I kind of think about it as listening in on someone's conversation. So it's a very, very dangerous game, and that's why it can sort of take up a lot of your time and energy, because some things you're not meant to hear. So if Bill and John are talking about their meal at Waffle, and one of them says, well, the roux was disgusting, and it wasn't actually roux, it was aioli or something like that, and then what do? You chirp in and say, well, actually, you're wrong, blah, 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 and then it's confrontational, and that's not a good thing. That's also not healthy. So initially, and I think even now, it's just a case of, if people are curious to ask you something, I'll always answer, and if I see someone I know or I follow is at the restaurant, I'll ask them how it was, whereas before it was too easy to get too submersed into it.
And have you embraced Instagram as much as you embraced Twitter?
Well, I prefer Instagram now. Instagram's my, it's just, I think maybe it's a bit rude, but it's, you don't have to talk to anyone. It's a bit more, it's picture-y, so you don't need to actually type words and engage, and things don't really get misunderstood in a picture, I don't think, when you're just posting a picture of food rather than, and some things can be quite confrontational.
Do you mind it when customers are Instagramming their food? Or is that part and parcel of the dining experience now?
It's a really interesting one. It's a question that comes up quite a lot in different sort of panels, and you're never going to stop people from doing it. And I have no problem whatsoever. Someone wants to wait a little bit to take a picture and then eat it. fine. I mean, sure, dinner, you're paying for it. But what I personally disagree with is either moving stuff about on the plate because it's not quite in the right format for your Instagram thing, so you want to expose a bit more of the green or a bit more of that. I think that's just, just sit down and eat it. And we had one thing that really sort of upset me, which was they were spending like 10 minutes pissing around with it and then sent it all back because it was cold. And that's I think is taking it a step too far. But we're not going to change it. So it's all getting worse, not worse, but more and more sort of intense.
And do you take pictures of your dinner when you're eating out?
Yes, I do. But I don't rearrange it and I don't send it back when it's cold. I do, because sometimes I want to, I think it's not just about showing what you're eating, but it's also about helping other restaurants. And if you've got a decent following and you've had a nice time and they've treated you well, and it's nice to be nice and it's nice to give them some love.
Would you ever do a negative post?
No. I think the reason I find Instagram better than Twitter is because I think it's quite inspirational. I think you share things or I follow people that post things that inspire me, or I think that's lovely, and it's quite a positive vibe. There's no point. What are you going to gain from posting a shit picture of, sorry, I keep swearing, a bad picture of bad food? It's not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for you. No one wants to see it, do they?
And then where would be your kind of go-to place for a good Instagrammable meal, or indeed, which are your favourite restaurants in London? Maybe the food looks horrible, but it tastes good.
I don't know. It's since having a dog, it changes your priorities when you're going out. The first question is, are dogs allowed? So I think locally to me, Bellinger is a beautiful restaurant, great service, great food. St John's one of my all-time sort of go-tos. I like good pubs, Draper's Arms, the Eagle, those sort of places.
And do you find yourself at the end of a shift eating out with your chefs at all, or is it straight home? Feed the dog?
I tend to, I think I'm growing up, but I think I need to let them go out and do what they want to do until 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'll just go home and hear about it the next day.
Thank you. I'm a bit pressed for time, so if anyone in the audience has any questions that they would like to ask, then please raise your hand. There's a lady over there in the corner.
We're working on a few new things. We can't quite talk about them just yet, but there's some things happening soon. That's all I can say. But it's a little tip: if you want to get a table, if you're organised, 2 months to the day. That's when we open our reservation. So if you wanted to book for the 22nd of November, you'll get any table you want. But I do keep saying that to a lot of people, so it might not be quite as.
Is it easier at lunch or dinner to get a table, or is it just hard to get in full stop?
It's a strange little restaurant. The time, Monday to Friday, you think it would be rammed between, midday and 3 because of all the city boys and city people. But it's really not. It doesn't really. It's kind of slow until about 2:30, and then it gets really busy. And then other days, it's so hard to predict. But we often do take walk-ins because ultimately people cancel or don't show up. So it's always worth to risk it if you can take a detour.
Anyone else have a question? The gentleman at the back.
What is your view on dogs in restaurants? Because you go to France and I've got dogs and every restaurant takes the dogs, whereas in the UK it's still very much the opposite.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be sitting here complaining about it just because I've got a dog. I think dogs in restaurants are fine as long as they're behaved and they don't start yapping away. If it becomes detrimental to someone else's experience, then I guess it's the same as having a screaming kid in a restaurant. I mean, they're allowed, but it is kind of annoying. But if you can control them, the dogs, I mean, not the kids, then why not?
Do you take dogs at Duck and Waffle?
We don't. But that's not our decision. That's the building rule. You're not allowed them anywhere in the building. Otherwise, we have the 6th floor of the building as well, and for all of our offices and all the HR and accounts. Otherwise, I'd just stick them in there all day. But instead, it's a doggy daycare, which is ridiculously expensive.
Any other questions? A lady on the front row here.
How much wastage of food do you get from your restaurant? Or is it?
It's a good question. I'm with the Academy of Culinary Arts, and the whole movement at the moment is to try and educate people into restricting their wastage. And we separate all of our recycling and stuff like that, and we just try to manage it as best as possible. It's difficult to quantify it in a number, but it's incredibly hard to make money off food. So just for a financial reason, it's better to not waste any food. And second of all, obviously, probably more importantly, it's the environment. So it's something that everyone I think is more cautious of now, and yeah, it is difficult to quantify that. Little, I hope.
With the Academy of Culinary Arts, I mean, do you see yourself in a mentor role these days?
I hope so. I mean, we take the students on the same course that I did when I was 16. I'm now doing what Herbert was doing and have the young students. So we have 4 apprentices now at Waffle, which are all 16 to 18 years old. And I think if you don't take time to help the next generation, then there won't be any, or there'll be a very different breed. And I think like in any walk of life, every generation succeeds, does better than the one before. So hopefully if everyone sort of takes time to help the kids, then we'll have lots of exciting chefs in 10 years' time.
Any more questions?
Do you think Japanese knives are worth the money versus
I personally, so if I'm working in a kitchen, like hardcore, Wusthof, the German knives are very, very good, and the only rival to them is the Japanese knives. The German ones tend to last a bit longer, but the Japanese ones tend to be a little bit more refined in there. It's much of a muchness. But if you're going to go Japanese, you need to spend a bit of money, because there's lots of bad, cheap Japanese knives out there.
Dan, my question to you is, how do you keep the team morale up when the going gets really tough? And do you hire and fire a lot of people?
So the hiring thing, I believe, hire slowly, fire quickly. So spend time recruiting properly, and when you do have a problem, try to deal with it. How do you keep the team morale up? I guess try not to let the go and get tough too much, and then you won't have that problem. We made a decision a few years ago to pay our chefs by the hour, to give them the flexibility. Some of them want to work 70 hours a week because they want to make money and they want to, submerge themselves in their work. Others don't. They want to work 40 hours a week because they've got a kid or they've got, school or whatever. So doing that already made it a lot more flexible. And when you've got a team that big, you can kind of accommodate everyone's needs and requests. And then, again, we took on, I'm not trying to preach that we're the best company in the world, but we took on the 6th floor of the building, and we have a staff room there, a canteen, there's like sofas and foosball tables and all that kind of stuff. So when they do get a break, the problem we had was they had an hour's break, but it takes 20 minutes to get out of the building. Then you're standing outside. So for 8 months a year, that's in cold, wet, horrible conditions. Whereas now they can stay inside, and there's vending machines and all that sort of stuff, and 2-3 hot meals a day. So it's trying to do all those little small things. But there's some great people like Hawksmoor. How they deal with their stuff is incredible, and it's all of those small things that kind of go a long way.
A gentleman at the back.
What's the role of doing events like Wilderness? Am I right?
Mhm.
Is that a marketing thing, or is it participating?
I just want to go to Wilderness. Wilderness is a different one. Things like Taste, and we did Feastival in some capacity, and Wilderness to a certain degree. But yeah, it's marketing. Ultimately, it's trying to reach a crowd that maybe doesn't or won't normally come to the restaurant. So, we've been approached by Ascot to do some stuff in previous years, which we may look at in the future, because all the people that go to Ascot may not be, working in the city or coming to the city to go out. But if we go and kind of expose ourselves there, maybe they'll come. Wilderness is a tough one because you're either a very small restaurant within 4 or 5 other restaurants inside this massive tent, or you're holding a huge banquet. And it tends to be the really, the Raymond Blancs and the Angela Hartnetts and those sort of people that do the big banquets, and then you're doing a smaller restaurant. But with Wilderness, it depends on so many different things. There's so many places to eat. They're all incredible. And if you've booked your banquet months in advance, you're not going to change that because you see the duck and waffles there. So it's when you do it from that point of view, you're more of a Plan B type restaurant. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you are. It's more like, let's have some breakfast. We'll go to duck and waffle, not let's make a point of going there for dinner type thing. So
I think the lady towards the back, yes.
You've got a book, your head chef, any TV appearances, any cooking programs?
Just the usual, Saturday Kitchen and stuff like that. Doing Saturday Kitchen in November, and we did it a few weeks ago as well, which is always fun. You never know what's going to happen on live TV. But yeah, the other bits and bobs do sort of pop up every now and again, but not Bake Off. Let's put it that way.
There are a few vacancies on Bake Off these days. Maybe get your CV in.
Really bad at baking this. I'm joking.
Does anyone else have a question? No, I think in that case, if we could all say thank you to Dan for joining us at Venues and Events today. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you, Dan.